Welcome back. And the next session is the promise of health tech in pharma, use cases and applications along the value chain. This session is the quarterly meeting of the McKinsey's Global Health Tech Network, which comprises around about 2,000 health tech network CEOs and founders and friends of the network, investors and others. It's my pleasure to introduce Tobias Silberman, who is a partner in the life sciences practice of McKinsey's, based in Berlin, a biochemist and immunologist with a focus on health innovation, health tech business building, and digital transformation. I'm sure this is going to be an exciting panel. Tobias, over to you.
Thank you, Vlad, and wonderful to be with you and your colleagues again at the Connected Health Alliance, the Digital Health Society. Thanks for having us. Yeah, we've got an exciting 90 minutes planned, all about health tech, digital health along the pharma value chain. Roughly, we cut it into two parts, and I'll quickly show you the overview where we are. So we will kick off with a quick intro presentation, lay of the land by Pirkka. This will be around where's the impact of digital health for pharma companies, where to play, how to play. I would say a bit more from the perspective of a pharma company. Then we will have a little bit of discussion and Q&A, and we will pretty seamlessly go into the panel discussion with our 5 wonderful panelists. I'll start at the top and welcome Till Bauer from Merck MSD, who has very broad and deep digital health experience and also looks at digital health from the perspective of Keytruda, one of the high impact medications in the oncology space. Welcome Hannes Toivanen from Takeda, who has also long-standing experience in the digital health space. He leads the digital ecosystem engagement for Takeda. Welcome Andrea from Perspectum. Many of you know them from the liver multi-scan imaging and algorithm space. And Andrea will tell us not only about that and the impact that they are driving there, but also how that can be applied from a pharma value chain perspective. Welcome Dan Vahdat, CEO of Huma, who has been really thinking a lot about modular digital health platforms and how modular digital health platforms can drive impact for pharma companies, not only in the decentralized clinical trial space, but also many other application areas. Welcome. And Sam Oddsson from co-founder of Sidekick Health, who has done a lot of work and I would say also a lot of pioneering work in the cognitive behavioral therapy gamification space. What I'm particularly interested in is that sort of Sam has the dual perspective, or let's say even the triple perspective, right? On the one hand, working with health insurances like Elevance in the US, then on the second side, and this is today's focus, working with pharma companies, and recently also through the acquisition in Germany in the prescription digital therapeutic space. So welcome all of you. And without further ado, I'll hand over to my colleague Pirkka. As questions are coming up, you're welcome to add them in the chat, or we can also see if someone is raising their hand, etc. So over to you, Pirkka, and looking forward.
Thank you very much, Tobias, and thank you very much, Vlad, for the intro as well. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for all those who are dialing in across the world. Let me just pull up the slides here quickly for the presentation, but maybe in the meantime, a few words of introduction of myself. My name is Pirkka Padmanabhan. I'm an associate partner with McKinsey in New Jersey, economist by training, but been with McKinsey for over 8 years, always focusing on the life sciences part of the value chain. And for I think over the last 5 or 6 years, I've been, along with Tobias and others in our group, been co-leading the McKinsey Health Tech Network and our service to companies all across the ecosystem when it comes to the topic of health tech. So, of course, startups and disruptors themselves. We've worked closely with investors, and for the last couple of years, I've been very closely involved in working with pharmacos all across the globe as they venture into this exciting space. Outside of that, I'm also the co-publisher of one of our publications that we bring out as McKinsey every year, which is the eHealth Monitor book for Germany, where we look at the progress of digitalization in healthcare in Germany along a set of metrics. as well as other publications and that we bring out as a firm. And so, as Tobias mentioned, I would love to kick us off for this event here, just giving a little bit of the lay of the land of how we see digital health and health tech, specifically with respect to how pharma can get involved with these sorts of activities. And so, a couple of topics that I want to cover today. One is I want to first share our views on, what kind of use cases are out there, which ones are the promising ones, and then pivot very, very quickly to the types of impact that we have seen, pharma achieve along these use cases, would go really across the value chain, all the way from R&D to, manufacturing operations, all the way to, patient-facing solutions. And then I'd love to spend a couple of minutes really, sharing our view on how pharma can capture the opportunity in this space, especially with respect to how quickly the space is developing and what the kind of journey could be as pharma digs in more and more to this space. And so, as Tobias said, I'd love to make this interactive. Please, submit questions in the chat as we go along. We'll have plenty of space for Q&A at the end as well, so that we can get through everything that is on your mind here. And so, digging in straight away, just to give a bit of a panorama, I think what we've observed over the last couple of years is of course a wide proliferation of solutions and use cases when it comes to digital health and health tech across the pharma value chain. And I think there are quite a few exciting ones that really straddle the entire value chain. I think we've seen tremendous development over the last couple of years, especially on the research side, on topics such as target identification, discovery, using machine learning for really accelerating, your early stage research and basically the probability of getting compounds to the next stage of development. That then, of course, translates through to solutions in development. And I know there are, obviously solutions that have been around for quite a while, such as Flatiron, right, which work closely with RWE. But there are also others, of which where we have a couple of colleagues who are really pioneering this space here in the room, who'll join us later for the panel. But then as we look a bit further downstream in the value chain, I think there's been tremendous excitement also on the product supply and operations piece, a lot often driven by ML, but digital twins and AI use cases that can help optimize the supply chain, all the way to, I think, a lot of the solutions that often pop up first in our heads when we think about health tech, which is the entire patient-facing space. So thinking about digital therapeutics, patient companions, but also platforms to educate patients and HCPs around treatment options, diagnostics, etc. And so, all that to say, there's a tremendous amount of excitement here. I think we've seen over the last couple of years an absolute acceleration when it comes to also the amount of partnerships that is occurring between pharmacos and between disruptors in this space. You see a couple of logos obviously here on the slide already. And so this is what we expect, just something to continue, of course, as we continue in the next couple of years. And so what I'd like to do now is maybe just go a little bit deeper into one of the four verticals, if you like. And I think like I said, the patient-facing space is usually one that very much is top of mind for folks as they think about health tech. And I think there's just, in my perspective, incredible excitement when it comes to that, both when it comes to solutions that are, let's say, independent, also that perhaps have an independent revenue generation aspect to it. Think about digital therapeutics, think about the DGAP pathway in Germany, and that I know other European countries such as Belgium and France are starting to adopt as well in their forms. But I think also what we've observed in the last, let's say, especially 12 months or so, is a very, very strong focus on diagnostics, thinking about how to use novel biomarkers, for instance, to help find to basically identify patients for appropriate therapy earlier on, looking into things such as audio-based biomarkers, but also using precision medicine to earlier discover patients at risk. And so I think this is an exciting area alongside the, let's say, more classic use cases that have been around for a little bit longer, such as medication management, adherence apps, CBT to some extent, and companion apps for things such as cancer. Alongside the classic education. And I think as we look forward, I'm very, very excited to see exactly what will be happening, especially on this earlier part of the patient-facing space, such as the screening and diagnostics. I think one last thing to mention on this point before I go a little bit into some of the impressive impact that we've seen, especially here in this patient-facing side, is I think oftentimes we get the question of how to think about segmenting the space a little bit. Of course, I've now talked through the value chain in a very discrete manner, but I think where we've seen a lot of excitement and power, as well as to say, is when players, both within pharma but across, are thinking about these solutions in combination, to say, how could a solution that is maybe partially aimed for patient-facing space, for therapies that may be on market already, how could they be used to help the development of new therapies, that perhaps in the same TA or so, for upcoming pipeline drugs. And so I think that's one thought I want to leave all of you as well, as we think about how can pharma really get into this space and at scale, right, and across the enterprise. And so before I go into that, what we've done within our group here at McKinsey is we've spent quite a bit of time over the last year or so looking in depth at the kind of impact that patient-facing solutions have had. And so we've done an extensive screening of the literature that's out there, especially by way of clinical studies. Of course, speaking extensively with a lot of the members of our network, but also the clients that we work with when it comes to adopting health tech solutions in pharma and beyond. And I think what the numbers that we see on this page really speak for themselves in terms of how far this segment of the sector has come and how much more excitement there could be, right? Like, I think medication treatment adherence, again, one of the classic use cases, is of course one where depending on the therapy in TA, there has been considerable excitement. That said, especially like my personal favorite area, the diagnostics and screening, I think some of the impact that we've seen has been, improved screening by 20 to 30%, right? Of finding more patients that really truly need the therapy in earlier on. So this is, at the end of the day, improving the quality of life and the way patients can be treated. And I think this is one that I think there will be more activity to come, especially with diagnostic accuracy, of course, in many TAs, such as, in imaging, but also in dermatology and stuff. There's a lot of excitement there. So that just to leave you all that I think there is a lot of promise there. I think in the discussions that we have a lot also with both pharmaceutical companies, but beyond, there's a lot of recognition of the value that it can add to patients ultimately. And this is what we're all here for. And so maybe just to now pivot a little bit to how we typically think about how pharma can play in this space. And like I was alluding to earlier, there is a whole variety of use cases that can be deployed, that can be applicable, and that obviously will be also very interesting to pharmaceutical companies looking to deploy health tech solutions in across different TAs. But the way we typically do it is we try to bucket it almost in five overarching plays, if you like, that can be very much thought of as plays to accompany perhaps a core pharma asset, be it an individual therapy or maybe a portfolio of therapies along TAs. And so the five plays that we typically think of are one, very much early in the value chain around tools and solutions that improve patient awareness, that offer the opportunity to find and diagnose patients early on. And those can be then solutions that are both deployed to patients, but often also very much to HCPs, right? To help them find those patients more early. And then we come to our digital therapeutics. This is very much the way we think about digital therapeutics, also to perhaps contrast it a bit from the third one you see here on patient companions, which is around standalone DTX, if you like. One DTX that would be perhaps in the realm of solutions that are aimed to generate revenues on their own. Of course, this is something where there's been a lot of movement in the industry lately, but still one to always consider. The third one is then these patient companions, almost a, let's say, archetypical classic health tech use case where patients just have an app to help monitor side effects, efficacy, but also make sure that they're able to take their therapies, in an appropriate manner, or also have caregivers help their loved ones with the therapies. And then the last ones are really around how to think about a bit more upstreams away from patients. One is for the clinical trial aspect that I mentioned earlier, thinking about RWE, but also thinking about solutions such as remote patient monitoring, perhaps to better monitor patients as they go through the different stages of the clinical trials. And that obviously has a substantial impact also, again, for getting therapies to patients quicker. Finally, I think there's a big piece around HCP education and support. I think we've seen over the last couple of years a couple of plays in certain TAs where also pharma has taken a big role to really think about how solutions such as this can be used to almost cut through the noise, if you like, of the HCP oriented education that's happening by pharma. And so typically when we have these conversations, we try to think about how could a pharma company use any of these plays individually, or again in a combination end to end, to ultimately support its core portfolio and drive some of the value drivers that I show here a little bit on the right hand side of the page, be it finding patients, getting them on the right therapy, individual sales, adherence, or just improving the time to launch of a therapy across any of the TAs that they're operating in. And so if I then reflect a little bit on how this has played out, at least in the conversation, some of the work that we've seen pharmacos do in this space. Typically, the way they get started is they can usually take one of three avenues to get into this area. And so one is a value play focus. So this is concretely linked to the 5 almost archetypical use cases that I've mentioned on the previous page, to say some pharmacos say, let's go very deep on patient companions, or let's go very deep on the clinical trial use case. And the thinking here is really to say, how can we build a platform that is best in class, that is going to help us achieve a certain value driver, a certain outcome that we're interested in, but then build a platform that is really scalable across our TAs and across our assets. The second is then to say, almost the opposite, to say, hey, let's focus on one single asset, marketed asset, or a certain pipeline, right? And say, let's go end to end. Let's try and build a solution that covers a couple of these archetypical plays: patient companions, R&D, HCP, education, etc., and just do that end to end and become the leader ultimately when it comes to these types of solutions in a certain indication or for certain asset. And then the third one is very much around going deep on a certain TA. So, for instance, imagine you're operating in the cardiometabolic space, and you're thinking about how to use a solution maybe aimed at diabetes and expand it further to hit or to support assets in a broader cardiac indications such as hypertension or others. And so those are typically the three types of plays that we've seen pharmacos undertake. Each of these has certainly its own advantage. Like I said, the value play, I think, really shows the depth of a certain solution. The TA focus is a bit of a play to almost segment yourself and also create a bit of a competitive advantage when it comes to being seen as a diabetes player, a cardiomet player, or a oncology player, etc. And then the end-to-end digital product oftentimes is often one that we see where players just want to go very deep and try and pilot solutions across different areas. And so oftentimes we're seeing those as certain lighthouse projects that are perhaps employed in, like I've said, in one pipeline asset or one marketed asset, but then provide the base and the platform to expand over time into other areas. And so the last question that we often get, or is often actually the first, I will say, is how can you get started? And I think we've seen in the industry, especially with partnerships, there's been a lot of activity, of course, but in many areas, of course, there's been, let's say, more of a sense of individual pilots, let's say individual franchises going after solutions, or individual regional organizations perhaps pursuing local partnerships, building local solutions, and kind of driving the health tech agenda that way. I think what we the way we typically think about it is a little bit more broad and a bit more holistic. And what the conversations we typically have is to say, to take a bit more of an enterprise or cross TA view. And I think where it all starts is at assessing the true value at stake for your portfolio. And so what that means at the end of the day is to look at the core assets, the core both on-market and pipeline assets that matter to a pharmaco, and to having a look at, along those value drivers as shared area, what could be the true impact near term as well as medium term to the pharma company and to all these TAs and indications across. And so we've actually developed a methodology over the years that helps us get to that relatively quickly. And I think that's important to be able to really prioritize resources, also to say where you want to go build an at-scale platform. And that then ties very much to the second point, to say once you've identified the value at stake across the portfolio, I think it's important to then take a holistic view to actually put a strategy down to paper to say, where do we want to go first? Which types of plays do we want to take? Do we want to go into the TA world? Do we want to pursue a value driver? And which are the assets that we're really going to pursue? And also, how does that then allow us to build a long-term journey in health tech? Because at the end of the day, oftentimes the first couple of use cases and platforms will form the nexus, both from a business and organization, but also from a technology and platform basis for future expansion. Then it's very much going out and building those first use cases. I think the big question there is around, how do you go and do that? Do you build it? Do you buy it? Do you partner it? And I think that's a critical one for companies to answer, and that'll vary inevitably by the type of TA that you're playing in. And then you start scaling. It's as easy as that. But I think the key is to start holistically, think end to end, and with the long term in mind.
Thank
so
you.
With that, should we go into the Q&A? I'm not sure if there's any questions that have come in the chat as well.
Yeah, I haven't seen any questions. Carolina and if any questions are, let us know. But I've got a few questions, and then I'll also open it up to Till, Hannes, Dan, Andrea, and Sam if they've got questions. And of course, then we will very quickly go into our panel discussion anyway. So maybe just to kick us off, Pierre, what's sort of your experience, right? Since many pharma companies are large corporates, right, who operate on global level, regional level, country level, right, and then they often have more than 50 country organizations, as well as lots of different disease area franchises or therapeutic areas, which then often have different needs related to digital health. So, you know, that alignment, or let's say that I now just call it strategic roadmap, right, that you described. So what's your experience there? Does sort of global region countries sort of meet together and get the 20 main voices in the room, or do you have different experiences?
Yeah, so I would say there's a couple of ways to think about it. I think the first is certainly, I think it's important to get the voices in the room, certainly to also make sure that local idiosyncrasies are captured, right, in any kind of strategy or solution that you're trying to design. And by the way, this will, and I mentioned those two because that's truly important. One is a strategy, but the other piece is also, as you start thinking about building a certain solution, there should certainly be input from from different stakeholders across franchises or regions, or again, depending on how you end up prioritizing. I think that's key. I think the second thing, however, is to then go back to this value lens. At the end of the day, you will find, you know, as you do the value at stake analysis and you think about which use case to prioritize, that there will naturally also be certain priorities and geographies that will come out of that analysis, and those will certainly also form the nexus a little bit of where you would go build. At the end of the day, it's you know, sometimes you can almost think of it as a lead market approach, right? Where you would say there's a certain markets which will go ahead, they will go build it because that's where the value is, and then others could tack on incrementally.
Thank you. Questions from the panelists before we start with the panel discussion? But maybe let's then start with the pharma lens in terms of the discussion. But if it's I will get back to that question in a minute, Vladimir, thank you for sharing. If we maybe start with the pharma lens before we go to the health tech lens, Till, maybe if it's okay to start with you, could you maybe just share a bit of an intro, but what are the digital health use cases along the pharma and Merck MSD value chain that you've sort of seen, pursued? What are the ones and what's the impact that you are most excited about?
Absolutely, and thank you for that. And Pirkka, great summary where you outlined all the opportunity spaces where pharma can embark on. I think great to be in that panel. Let's immerse in a company like Merck or MSD, 50 billion in revenues, approximately 60% is in oncology, or the other ones is across infectious diseases, primary care, hospital products. So very broad, and vaccines, obviously strong footprint in vaccines. So very broad, I would say, segmentation of where the company basically is engaging with. The other piece is, think of more than 50% is happening in the US market. Then outside of this, approximately 20% is in the core European markets, and Japan, and the rest is allocated to emerging markets, to China, to Latin America and other markets. So it's a very diverse setting on how you basically embrace the opportunities around digital health. And you said it nicely, Pirkka. We're looking obviously in all dimensions of the value chain, from research and development, very advanced artificial intelligence for drug discovery, computational modeling, clinical trials, digital platforms for patient recruitment. The other piece certainly happening and accelerating is in manufacturing supply chain, where you just see in continuous connectivity and automation and production, real-time monitoring. Think of a very transparent and traceability end-to-end view from plants to patient, and how to support basically this pathway in getting all the insights around that one. I think that's a strong focus on the manufacturing supply chain. When it comes to healthcare delivery, patient care, as well as data analytics and evidence-based decisions, I think we're exploring heavily all kind of precision medicine near areas like AI-enabled patient identification, digital pathology, digital radiology, decision support solutions for providers, solutions for better patient education, navigation, just to mention a few. And obviously the hot topic is in generative AI, natural language processing, and large language models, how to embed this in various use cases. So the way how we basically offer insights and relevant action based on this insights is changing, not only internally, but will be changing for the external ecosystem as well. So this is where we heavily invest in that one. And when it comes from and you were asking for impact is always addressing a better patient experience, addressing better outcomes overall, lower costs, or improved clinical experience, paving the way to a value-based care environment. And what's interesting to me is, like, according to some studies from Medscape's annual physician's lifestyle report, 42% of physicians responded that they had a reported burnout. So how can technology enable to make not only the patient's life easier, but especially a meaningful impact on the pathway for the providers and physicians? So the questions of what I'm really proud of, and this is partly based on the prior role as well as heading global partnerships innovation with a focus on oncology, is helping the internal organization and mobilizing the internal organization to embrace adjacent innovations. So getting them a little bit broader in their view, adjacent around the therapies. And one of the results, what we saw, and you said it nicely, a lot of pilots are going on. So sometimes it feels like an airline, a lot of pilots. What you see, we have more than 70 pilots initiatives seen across the market and therapeutic areas. And the challenge is then the pilots, you see how to scale this one. And I will come back in the discussion later on. How many actually of these concepts are readily available or feasible for scaling. And the other piece I would highlight, I'm proud of, is establishing ourselves as a strong innovation partner with various stakeholders in the ecosystem. So there needs to be some learning dynamics internally as well, how to partner with a different set of mindsets in strategic partnerships. And to be concretely, some examples, what I would highlight is remote monitoring. So we basically started from the later end of the therapy process. This is where I would say on treatment optimization happens. This is where remote monitoring and the catalyzation plays a role. Focus there, immuno-oncology therapies with respective evidence study. We see early signals that patients are less likely to escalate their condition when symptoms are recognized earlier. So that's a strong and good signal direction, which basically I think strives for the ambition to much more embed therapies with respective companions and remote monitoring, symptom management solutions like that. The other piece, which we consistently see in the ecosystem, is effective decision-making in multidisciplinary tumor boards in the oncology context. So how to bring information and relevant decision making capabilities together, that's another focus.
Great. Thank you for lining that out, and very much like how you framed it at the beginning, right? The corporate view across different dimensions. Hannes, what sort of the Takeda view, right? Would you agree with all of that? And what is sort of the areas of impact from a Takeda perspective that you would be proud of related to digital health?
Well, I guess it's an open secret that all the pharma companies struggle with the same issues and challenges, and would like to copy from each other, just change the numbers and the size, and we're almost the same. I like to say maybe a couple of things. What is kind of my personal, but also like Takeda's, main, I would say, guiding principles, when we go about digital health. First of all, everybody, we're excited to do it, and that's great. But Takeda is in the business of highly innovative medicine. So I think the context of digital health effort for us is that we have, first-in-class or best-in-class assets. And that often, accompanies that, the patient, we're about changing patient journeys and changing, healthcare. So that really invites the question, what's the innovation? How can we add value for the patient and for healthcare people when we do this change? It's not that we want to add something new to that. And I think there is very important to remember that digital health is not something like a boilerplate. We're talking about creative people. I think the best innovations come from people who have a passion for this. They have a personal or family relation to the problems they're trying to solve. So you really need to put emphasis on, what kind of people can make this change to happen. It's not like a standard boilerplate thing that you can go about. And I think it's not only about the strategy, it's also appreciation of the skill and passion and the talent that people can bring on the table. I think that's one of the things. The other thing is, I think for us as a company, which is a really sticking point to us, how do we scale? I think we are a big company. It's all about getting there to scaling. We've also done a lot of, piloting. So how do we do scaling? So patient safety first, we have the clinical validation, everything. I'm very happy to say we as a company are now having a small pool of companies that work with us for many years. We're starting to get there, scaling geographically, scaling different therapeutic areas. I think these two are the guiding principle for us that we're looking at. How to change the patient journey around our asset, how do we create value for those patients? And how, once that is, proof of value is there, how can we actually have a win-win-win, partnership and start scaling?
Thank you, Hannes. Then we'll get back to that. Andrea, if it's okay, we'll continue with you. So I would say most of the people will know Perspectum, but maybe for the few people who don't, if you could maybe give a mini intro, sort of what impact you are driving towards that at Perspective, sort of at one hand, right, and then also sort of shifting towards how does that now look from a pharma Pharma plus Perspectum lens, right? What is the impact that you can drive sort of together with pharma companies, please?
Yeah, thank you. So you may know Perspectum, but you may not have met me before. So I lead our translational sciences. So much of what's just been said actually really resonates quite strongly with me in terms of potential barriers and changing of perceptions when you're translating innovation. Because I think what our job is to do is to try and establish the evidence that yes, our measurements work, and I think as just mentioned by a previous speaker, the clinical validation is there, but also that it works for patient management and for the system and for the payers and for the whole infrastructure. That sort of work, it goes beyond just what does your test do, but I suppose that's sort of specifically what we do. So we're a digital health company. We generate biomarkers or radiomics from medical images, so quantitative features from medical images that then can provide some sort of information, either as a diagnostic or a prognostic or as a monitoring tool. Our origin story, if you like, is with fatty liver disease, where there's a really distinct unmet need for non-invasive ways to assess the health of the liver, and a huge appetite that's shared by both clinicians, payers, and certainly patients to move away from an invasive liver biopsy. So that's sort of where the opportunity to apply non-invasive technologies and imaging in particular. Over the past 12 years since we've been running, we've achieved regulatory clearance now for 4 radiomics-based software as a service platforms, most of which in the liver, but we've branched out now to looking at multiple organs within the abdomen and the heart. We've achieved acknowledgement in medical and clinical guidelines, have achieved CPT codes for the test to be ordered and health insurance coverage for it to be reimbursed. And I think specifically for this particular discussion, one of the routes by which we've achieved some amount of success is through our involvement in clinical trials and in drug development. And one of the schemes that we've been really proud to be active with is with the biomarker qualification schemes. This is something the FDA set up, I think it was back in 2016, to evaluate certain biomarkers in terms of specific contexts of use, to allow them to then be familiar with them and for these biomarkers to be used in drug development. And so we've been working very closely with the FDA on that. Our starting point was to identify tools to be used in patient stratification to then sort of limit those that would need to have an unnecessary liver biopsy to enter into clinical trials. And as the field is moving, FDA also is supportive of this to try and eventually move away from the need for liver biopsy. We're all working very closely to try and understand the barriers and the evidence requirements to be able to eventually move away from liver biopsy entirely and have imaging, hopefully, as a surrogate endpoint in clinical trials. And then that provides a really nice natural segue into clinical application in the healthcare setting as well. So can the same tests that are then used in clinical trials and then perhaps in the prescribing label then be applied in healthcare itself to identify the right people for the treatment at the right time. So yeah, we're very proud to have been quite heavily involved in sort of that segue between drug development and clinical practice. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrea. And I think also very, very interesting, from a perspective of innovation, right? Moving from your innovation to a reimbursement code is also not something that everyone achieves. But more to that later. Thank you, Andrea. And then, if it's okay, would love to understand a bit from you and Huma's perspective, but you've been thinking about modular digital health platforms from the perspective of a pharma company, right? And you are working closely with Bauer for many years and with AstraZeneca, of course, as a very interesting arrangement as well. So would love to hear a bit, sort of what is sort of the impact that you are most proud of from that perspective, and B, also any reflections on that notion around modular digital health platforms from the perspective of a pharma company?
Sure. Good afternoon and maybe good morning to people that calling from the US and dialing in. Maybe before I start, Tobias, I really want to reiterate how important it is the role of McKinsey and these kind of events to ensure that the ecosystem gets educated about digital health and the different use cases, because we are still in the very much of early days, pioneering stage of adoption of technology in healthcare. And the reason I started Huma, ultimately, the main reason behind it was, is there a way for me, through what I do and what we do at Huma, to accelerate adoption of technology within the world of healthcare, life sciences, and governments, to make the delivery of care more proactive and predictive rather than reactive, the way that it is today. So in that sense, what you do, it really resonates to me. And the way we approach that to achieve this kind of big goal is by making and launching regulated softwares for the context of care delivery or research delivery really easy, and ensuring that as a part of the collaborations with our partners, we make the solution sustainable with the right ROI. And this is really, really important, because if the ROI is not there, both from the patient's perspective, which would be impact and outcome, but also from the client perspective, from the revenue and all the metrics that matters to them, these solutions won't get scaled. And as Till mentioned, there are lots of pilots. Nobody wants one more pilot if there is no path to scale it. And one of my first jobs these days when I partner with our collaborators is like, can I find the reasons for not to do that pilot rather than find the reasons to do it? And really pressure testing, and as the Germans would say, measuring twice before cutting, ultimately. Now, I also want to recognize so much has changed since 5-6 years ago. 5-6 years ago, we go to these trends, to these meetings, and at least for us, we wouldn't have had any interactions with those companies that they were in the panel like this. But today, I do have collaborations, although small, with MSD. I do work with Takeda and Hannesen and his team. And these are really exciting initiatives, because through collaborations and doing something, even if they're small, we are learning a lot from each other's. And I want to really put lots of weight on the knowledge and know-how and the expertise that pharma can bring to the world of digital health. Historically, I think everybody looked at pharma just as a cash, basically, box, so people can get money for doing digital. But we actually see a lot of value on the know-how they bring, as well as some of the scaling they can bring to the table. Going to some practical examples without taking too long, I actually love the work we have done at together with AstraZeneca as one example. We have a number of successful examples like that. Together we partnered, we picked a specific region, a specific therapeutics area, and actually we really leveraged the infrastructure in that country. In the case of the US, the reimbursement code models for RPM and RTM codes. And jointly, we launched an RPM solutions for respiratory patients, asthma, and COPD. And this is the beginning of this year, right? Q1 this year. And in less than 9 months, we are today largest, I think, respiratory RPM company. Now, we achieved it partially leveraging Huma configurable disease agnostic platform, which got FDA approved as a class 2, and also we do have EU MDR class 2B, enable us launch solutions because of the capability and regulatory framework, being able to do diagnostic predictions, all the good stuff. But also really bringing all the know-how of respiratory that AstraZeneca has had built historically, and leveraging their channels and the access they had to all these networks. And this is something that we can do together with other partners. You might have heard of some of our work in oncology. We announced with Merck Germany in this case, not MSD, and others. And this is based on the same kind of the blueprint. I have access to 35% of community hospitals in the US, so I can leverage that plus everything else that my pharma partner can bring to really take things to the next level. And ultimately, the end goal is, how can I give solutions either in form of RPM or software as a medical device to patients to help them to navigate their disease, know what to do, know what not to do, and being supported along the journey, activate more patients, keep patients more adherent, longer on the therapy, and potentially in some use cases create real world data on the patient side. And on the clinical side, and the nurses, the doctors, I think Teal again mentions about the burdens, the burnout of all these workforce. We partner with Google on Gen AI, and we are really proud on some of the things that we have launched already in productions in hands of our nurses. How can we make a nurse a super nurse, so that same nurse, through our platform, regulated platform, look after 10x more patients, but working less? Now, I don't want to make a claim that we have got to the level of 10x, but we have already increased massively in efficiency of our patients, our nurses, to interact with our patients cohort. And if we get, and when we get to 10x, that is suddenly a totally new world, because the unit economy would be different. I can do things that maybe even 2 years ago was considered financially not sustainable, but now can be sustainable. And that is the trend that we are really investing a lot on the clinical side. And we think by combining these two, what we do for the patients and what we do for the clinical staff, this is where lots of adoptions and impact and sustainability will come out of it. Having said that, I want to recognize we're still in the journey, and I don't want to celebrate too much. And these journeys requires a smaller step, solid step, with a good scientific kind of considerations behind it. But we are very excited and really, really energized about what we see and the speed we are getting to the scales that we have put as a target for ourselves.
Thank you, Dan. Great to hear. And I like the term super nurse. Sam, to conclude our intro round, right? What I found as someone who has also experimented with all sorts of well-being, and then the gamification, cognitive behavioral therapy topic comes up, of course, all the time, right? The engagement rates, activation rates, engagement over time. What I find very interesting, right, is that you do that direct to patient, especially in Germany. You do it with Elevance on the insurance side in the US, and you do it with pharma companies. So I guess for the few of you who might not know Sidekick Health, could you also quickly introduce what Sidekick Health is about, and then B, what is the impact that you are most proud of?
Yes, absolutely. And before I begin, it's a great pleasure to be here with you today. And I'd like to echo a couple of points that Dan made on kind of, we are still in the early days when it comes to realizing the value from digital and pharma partnerships. And I'd love to share a few thoughts on both where we are and where we're heading. But for those who don't know, my name is Sam Oddsson. I'm one of the two co-founders of Sidekick Health. We are a digital therapeutics company working with partners like Elevance Health. So we drive the chronic disease management for Elevance Health across over a dozen conditions. So we have a platform approach. So Elevance Health is one of the top 3 health insurers in the US. And we work with most of the major pharma companies, mostly in the digital companion space, where we have the experience to have taken a pilot in one country and scaling it globally, going across over a dozen countries, and also expanding when it comes to the TA reach. So I'd like to stress that if we take a step back and look at where we are to date in terms of partnerships between pharma and digital, as has been said and Till mentioned, and Hannes too, there has been a lot of piloting going on, and what we will be seeing in the coming years is that I foresee pharma will be becoming like more selective, putting more thrust behind initiatives that have, you know, the rationale and the data to build on. So from the Sidekick point of view, we sometimes see that, you know, pharma and digital, they come together in a meeting room and they dream about big things. But, you know, coming at this as a medical doctor, seeing patients every day, there's often a gap between the ideas that happen in those very innovative meeting rooms between pharma and digital, and then the real world. And we can talk a lot about, you know, different types of disruption in terms of data, but I guess the secret behind our success, now having scaled the company to 279 full-time employees and acquired the world's most prescribed digital therapeutic, like you mentioned, Tobias, is, you know, let's bring it back to the patient. The patient needs to be in the focus. I was once in the position to evaluate digital innovation on behalf of hospitals. So kind of having been on that side of the table has helped us to, again, be selective when it comes to piloting with pharma. As Dan mentioned, you can't run after every idea if you want to really, you know, punch a hole through the wall. So I'd say in a nutshell, that's kind of our approach. There's a lot of value to be captured, and we're just, it's still early days, but it's looking very, very promising.
Thank you, Sam. So just in that perspective, you know, yes, it is more about pharma, but could you also say a little bit about the collaboration model you do with Elevance, so that people know about that? I think that's also an interesting application with their care managers.
Yes, absolutely. So we have been partners with Elevance Health, formerly known as Anthem, for several years now. And what we're doing there is that we are basically driving their care management and disease management. They've had, so they insure 48 million members that have different types of conditions. And what we've been seeing, and we're publishing right now as we speak, is some you know, amazing impact that is actually approved, like a significant reduction. We're talking about dozens of percentages reduction in ER visits for patients with cancer, as an example, and reduced admissions that are chemotherapy related, also with cancer patients. But to summarize the partnership, we basically work with them in over a dozen conditions, and we see, you know, synergies between the pharma partnerships, because very often in the pharma partnerships, they, as has been pointed out, they sometimes do not scale, you know, because pharma plus digital, you still need to have patient access, right? So you know, having a payer relationship like this truly helps with patient access. And then if you have the correct engagement and retention capabilities in your platform, then you can generate the data, and it's first then that you can realize any value from it. Thanks.
Hi, Sam. Lots of what you said made me think of lots of questions. It's really fabulous to hear the progress that you've made. And I was sort of reflecting on I was on a seminar last week, and a lot of the barriers to adoption are sometimes more perceptual than they are actually pragmatic. And it might be, you know, changing the way people have always done something, or, you know, perception around accessibility versus, you know, a genuine blocker. And I think the world of digital health probably had to change and adapt quite quickly during the COVID pandemic. And I'm just wondering if there are any sort of learnings that you took from having to react, or services having to deliver in a digital environment, from COVID and how we might be able to sort of learn more and continue to sort of capitalize on what was a terrible experience worldwide.
No, COVID was a very interesting period from many angles. Specifically for us, it acted as a major accelerator. We were having conversations with many stakeholders, healthcare providers, and the likes of Elevance, and suddenly, almost overnight, everybody was convinced that remote disease management was the way to go. So all the skepticism around that, those that believed in the brick and mortar approach until COVID, we haven't heard much about that. And actually yesterday I was giving a presentation for the Nordic health ministers, and yeah, they are all in agreement that we need to digitalize the brick and mortar systems. It will not happen overnight, but things have started moving in that direction. So that's very clear.
Maybe a follow-up question: as strategic partnerships become more and more important among the ecosystem players, and if I reflect on my pharma environment, I think it's a continuous, I would say, calibration of having excitement in the room and having some of the, I would say, sometimes self-imposed organizational constraints like risk aversion and all of that one. And ideally, whenever we look at opportunities, the first question: do we have a proof of concept already? And how do you deal with this different kind of expectations, especially in the ideation phase, co-developing or co-collaboration phase, that there's a higher need for, let's call it, a proof of concept? And how do you take like large pharma companies along the journey, or pharma companies take you on the journey, so vice versa?
I guess I can share my aspect, and I'm sure that Dan has great learnings too. Our approach is that like one of the mentors at my hospital used to teach us, in God we trust, all others must bring data, and it becomes easier, with as you get more partnerships, more users, more data, then you often have a strong foundation of learnings that you bring to the pharma partner, and for these like co-creation partnerships that are strategic and co-created, and I guess that's one of the things that, and this is kind of the rationale to me. I believe pharma will be more selective when embarking on pilots, because I'm hearing from our pharma partners that there is like pilot fatigue, with small companies, because they're not scaling again and again and again. So you have to have like a critical mass, a critical level of knowledge and learnings and know-hows, how to tackle localization across borders, how to tackle pharmacovigilance. Pharma can't be reinventing the wheel with new digital partners all the time. But so that's one aspect for an answer to this one. I could probably talk all day, but I'm gonna let others chime in.
Sure. Till, I think this is a really, really good question. And I think we should recognize we all are going through a journey and everybody's learning, both people on the pharma side, what digital can do and cannot do, and what's the best way to actually go about digital. It's not a drug. It requires a totally different type of environments to really grow and delivers value. And also for digital health companies like ours, like Sam's, we had to go through a lot of learnings, the regulatory stuff, the pharmacovigilance stuff, the scaling stuff, the localizations, and things that if they're not in place, it doesn't make sense for pharma to work with. Now, are we in an ideal place? I don't think so yet. but the trends are in right track. Having said that, I talk a lot about what are the key things from a pharma side has to be in place so that the project will become successful. Number one, reducing the number of people that they make decisions. It is so important. And again, if I want to use, AstraZeneca as a good example, 3 people, they make all the decisions for the projects that we do, more or less. They may interact with some people internally, but we don't interact. And one of them is head of the, basically, biopharma, the toughest level you can get. And then 2 people from the digital team that they really understand what we do. And I've been in some other pharma meetings to do a project that I've had 60 people dialing in to a call. 60, probably equal to the amount of people that may dial into this conference. And having a small team is really important. The second is, which is my passion these days, what is the ROI? Am I making a difference? Is the difference meaningful enough? Because I have been part of projects that my impact would have been 20, 30 million saving or value creations per year. And the drug is like a $3 billion drug per year. Is the impact even meaningful for someone wanting to take a risk? Because also doing a project is not only a cost that they have to pay to vendors like us, but also is an internal cost, is a distraction. You need to include all these things. Really spending time with the team and the budget holder to ensure that the ROI is really there. And third one, I have been part of the big projects that they start very big numbers, everybody excited. I used to be excited about those projects. And then in the middle, new reality, new learning kicks in. And then suddenly the prospect of the project changes. And one of the reasons we built our platform configurable disease agnostic class 2 was, can I do a play that with a small budget, in a matter of 1 month, from a signature, I can launch a regulated software for a specific use case and be live with one use site or 2 sites minimum, and then collect data and see how this MVP works in real life. And then if the trends was good, let's double down. If there are learnings, let's change and refine when we haven't, built something too big, too complicated, and everybody invested, and it's like already 2 years in the project or 1 year in the project, and everyone asking, where is the value add? Where is the scale? Where is the traction? And I think on that part is really important. And finally, I think this is something that the pharma is going through, ensuring that the people on the other side, they equally appreciate what it takes to launch technology. They have had enough experiences. I rarely like actually to partner with the pharma partners that has already not made some mistakes, because when they haven't done anything before, they come with this wish list of, let's launch a solution, integrate it to all the hospital systems around the world. And the wish list is too long, almost impossible to deliver, even with unlimited budget, let alone reality of life is always certain limitations. And making sure that the partner on the other side has kind of the understanding of what it takes to make success and be realistic is really important. And again, as Sam mentioned, the list is very long, but I will stop here, and maybe Hannes and the team from his side can also share.
Yeah, great. So many great thoughts here. I'm gonna, if I can step in, Tobias, that's all right. So first of all, everybody's envious of AstraZeneca. I think that's all clear then, and I can recognize the sting there. I think one of the things is, where are we with digital health in pharma? I think, if you look at the CEOs are talking, for example, what our CEO is talking, he's talking about Takeda as a digital biopharmaceutical. So we have a big license from the senior management. Let's do this. We did a big reorganization to have a global, digital health organization. However, we're 55,000 people, and not everybody is, full on board. It's kind of we are here in an echo chamber of digital health. So a big part of my job is actually go around the asset teams, people who have a really great stellar career in science and medicine, to tell them about, hey, here is this new cool thing, digital health. And they look at me, all right, what's the value for the patient? Look, I'm busy launching this asset in 88 countries. What do you bring me on the table? And that's kind of, I'm in a role where mediating these different needs in the company. I think it's very important to understand that. And besides, I think one of my, when I'm thinking why we do this in partnership, why we do different kind of things, my main worry is really how do we ensure the acceptance of digital health, outside the pharma. I don't worry about if Takeda likes it or not. I really worry about, do patients really love this? Do nurses and HCPs and hospitals and healthcare providers? And that's where I really need, partners like, Sidekick Health or Huma and others to make this acceptable. And I want to, highlight a case in point. One of the areas of activity and investment we were really active was how to use AI for early diagnosis in rare diseases. We've been really, it's one of those really wicked areas where, patients have a long diagnostic journey, they have misdiagnosis. What's the potential for AI to get, improve access to therapeutics there? And what happened in Takeda was actually that we went to a lot of clinics and hospitals, and we were singling out, one rare disease and say, hey, we're going to do project on this. And now what we have learned, this is not very appealing to hospitals because, one rare disease, honestly, it's not really, they are busy with the big diseases. So what we need to do, actually, we need to go there. And this is something where we're getting at, that we have a partner that says we can do AI for rare disease diagnosis in 50 or 100 or 200 rare diseases. That turns the table. Then we actually go, and a couple of those are our therapeutic areas. And I think this is kind of the thinking where we are more and more getting into that, we cannot be only focused on the one asset that we are thinking about. How do we actually partner, across the board so that the offering is really, that we can bring in the healthcare systems that actually in the end game will be responsible for the scaling. It's not really, for pharma's company, to be the running everything in the end. We really need to make sure that they are acceptable for patients, healthcare professionals, and healthcare systems. And that's why we really need, scaling partners.
Thank you, Hannes. Andrea, you have the floor.
Yeah, I think if I may, thank you for that. That was super insightful. And I think the discussions around having lots of different conversations within big organizations and sort of the frustrations in terms of making progress there, but then the analogous side is then if you're trying to translate into healthcare and all of the different parts of the organizations that we're going to need to communicate with. One of the things I think we have a responsibility of us in the field is to be more considerate about how we talk about and socialize AI, and perhaps be more specific. I think AI can be quite an emotive term, and I think it probably in some reviewers' eyes it can almost be sort of off-putting, particularly perhaps sometimes to the patient. I think there are sort of prefixes we could probably start to be using more when we're talking about AI, such as it's assistive, it's decision support tool, or it's augmentative. Not never perhaps, but we're often not suggesting we've got a test that could replace the doctor entirely. It's almost always some sort of decision support. And I think perhaps I'd like to hear perhaps how some of the colleagues on the call feel about how best to support the adoption of AI-enabled technologies.
Any immediate reactions to Andrea's point? There's also an audience question that we should cover. Hannes, maybe?
Yeah, I thought there was this audience question, right?
Yeah, okay, maybe we'll come back to the adoption point in a second, Andrea, since that question came in from the audience. That's maybe to you, Hannes, and Till. But there was the question: how do pharma companies think about partnering for digital health versus building certain digital health solutions or modules internally versus buying companies or acquiring companies in the digital health space or investing in them as part of their CVC. Could you lay out a little of how the thinking is within Takeda and McKinsey?
Yeah, I can. So I think it's all about hedging at this stage, because there's not like a clear winner where the world is going. So Takeda has invested capabilities and even launched some of in-house built applications. I think we're also working a lot with external partners like Huma. I think it's a learning phase. We don't have like explicit policy where it's going to head or what's going to look like. When I think about it, I'm trying to think what's the analog where we are. It's almost like early days of the smartphone. Nokia they missed because they tried to build their own thing. I think it's a great example what happened there. I think another analog is what happened in the car industry. If you look at the infotainment systems, which car company has been really managed to build like a great infotainment system. I think that gives you some guidance where we're heading. And I think pharma industry right now is kind of a let's wait and see where we go. But we as a company are kind of have a two-pronged strategy right now. We have our in-house built systems and then we have partnering systems. And I think let's see where it really heads. One, I'd want to remind one of the things is really that we have dozens and dozens of assets in different areas, 88 countries that we're serving. So that always comes into play really, and which part of the patient journey we want to address. So I don't think there will be a blanket answer for everything.
Thank you, Hannes. Till?
I would add, there are different ways of looking at that, and there's a certain journey when I compare the last 10 years in the organization. We started out very early with the Global Health Innovation Fund, which basically focused on direct equity investments to catalyze digital health. So this is strongly successful, still in place, 500 million investments ranging from 2 to, I would say, depending on the assets, 2 to 10, 15 million in investment. So really the objective is to catalyze the capabilities in the ecosystem and to include potentially capabilities into the Merck or MSD organization. So that's the investing one, which is a strong pillar. The other piece, which historically was interesting, we had an own health solution business where we basically offered solutions beyond the therapy with own revenue generating business. So we don't have this anymore. This was kind of terminated a couple of years ago. And what is emerging of the partnership space. This is where we keep driving strategic partnerships with the companies here in the panel, where we try to address leverage points in the pathway. And what's interesting, I think, going away more from a brand-specific perspective, Hannes, you mentioned it, more to an agnostic ecosystem perspective. If you would compare it like, is it around the therapy or beyond the therapy? It's still more around or adjacent to the therapy as a focus. So I think the business case is still circled around the therapies to show impact. But I think to the question, investing to catalyze startup ventures is a big topic, and partnering is getting much more important. I think the building on our own, I think, is probably the last order when I would put it in order.
Thank you, Till. Pirkka?
Yeah, thank you, Hannes and Till. I think there's another audience question which I'd like to bring. So staying on the theme of partnerships, there's a question around how could startups that could be considered future partners of pharma companies kind of manage to come into the focus? How do you cut to the noise almost is I think the core of the question that I'm seeing here in the chat. I don't know, Hannes, Till, if you have a perspective there.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that briefly. So first of all, it's like we try to meet as many companies as we can. We're just I think our digital health team, we meet about 500 companies a year. That's the track we're trying to keep. But I think that, in business, timing is always important. So we've tried a lot of the early funnel. We have tried to put that into open innovation challenges. We put out to people, say, look, this is the asset. This is the thing that we are really thinking about. If you have a great idea, please, submit your idea there. And then we can keep talking. Always, random chances are great to meet, but, we have our list of priorities and we try to focus on those.
Phil, anything to add from your end?
I think just be bold, as we have a lot of, I would say, strategic priorities to follow up with. And I think be bold, be very prepared, and be very proactive. And expand the horizon and into the pharma organization and bring the digital health topic on the agenda, or help bring it to the agenda. Do not underestimate the learning curve a pharma company needs to undertake when it comes to digital health. So basically, it comes from all the quality systems around medical products. I think we're very good in administration devices, auto-inject, and whatsoever. But once connectivity comes into play, then the whole regulatory framework quality system needs to be upgraded to new endeavors. And don't underestimate the end-to-end alignment in an organization, in a large pharma organization. So it needs to be really aligned across all the information, across the organization, across all levels. And I think take your time to find the right person who has the decision rights, who has the funding. Internal funding is not always clear. So Dan, to your point, who drives the decision, who owns the problem, and who owns the funding? Ideally is one person. Sometimes it's allocated across multiple persons. To have a clear understanding of the decision making, I think is clear. It's important. And what we're doing, basically helping all the startups getting connected to us and get a navigated way through the organization. Just that we make it easier for any company approaching us. Otherwise, it's a too much of an endeavor.
Wise words, Till. Maybe coming back to your point, Andrea, around adoption, right? There have been two adjacent, I would say, audience questions in the chat. One related to telco partnerships for scaling adoption, and then there is another one around patient engagement and what works and not. I don't know, Dan, do you want to say something about the telco piece, and then maybe Sam, you about the patient engagement piece, what you've seen working there?
Yeah, I guess before jumping to this topic, addressing the previous topic, one of my main motives of Huma is accelerating adoption of technology. Now, whether it's Huma technology or someone else, it's a secondary. And the reality is, at Huma, there are so many things that we don't do. One of the best, I think, people that can help you if you're a digital health company innovator in this space to navigate pharma is finding other entrepreneurs or companies that actually are working within an organization. They can help you at least zoom into the right persons, as Till mentions and Hannes mentions, and position yourself correctly, or knowing their priority, because sometimes you might have a great technology, they might have an asset, but it might not be their priority at all to even invest in that sense. And in that case, someone like myself or Sam or whoever, if you're already working with that organizations, please use that network. At the end of the day, our collective success is going to benefit patients, number one, our partner, number two, and ourselves as digital health companies in that ecosystem. So that's kind of a little bit of a answer to the previous questions. In terms of telcos, if Tobias, your question is whether you see value in telcos involvement in digital health, is it the question you asked?
Yeah, that was exactly. That was the audience question around partnerships about scaling digital health.
Yeah, I think this is my opinion, and some people might not like it. Forget telcos. Telcos have no clue, no knowledge. They are the past. And they decided to miss the mobile world, the whole technology and adoptions that happened during the mobile. They missed cloud computing. They missed AI. They know nothing, and they can do nothing, and they are like behind. This is applicable for 95% of them. Maybe there is a 5%. In some countries, there's some innovative ones, but majority of them, they're just kind of like a pipe for like water or electricity. Now this is just a data. I won't spend too much time with them. We have spent a lot of time historically and wasted, and I have zero to show for. So that's kind of my experience. I might be harsh, but this is like what I have seen at this. And I have not seen yet a big success working with telcos anywhere. There are lots of announcements, no tangible success. But I love to be proven wrong, by the way. If there are cases that someone has done something great, please reach out. Because if they can help, why not?
Thank you, Dan. And maybe, Simon, your view on patient engagement, and then I think we are also running out of time. I think it's 15 past in 3 minutes. So maybe let's also wrap up soon so that we don't derail the conference. But Sam, over to you related to patient engagement.
Yeah, thank you so much. I guess my take-home message is that when crafting partnerships between digital and pharma, just keep in mind that without enrollment, engagement, and retention, you have nothing. No matter the deal that you craft between the digital and the pharma company, and yeah, I guess there are many companies out there that are kind of the team of engineers building solutions that are so complex that they're only meant for other engineers to use, which explains kind of our gamification and behavioral approach. I grew up as a practicing medical doctor in internal medicine, cardiology, trying to reach out to those patients, and there's tremendous room for improvement on that front, because at the end of the day, there's value to be extracted from the data here, and without the engagement piece, you won't get any data. I guess that's my take-home message here. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's be good guests and finish on time. With that, I say thank you to all of you for this great discussion. I very much enjoyed it, and thank you to Bledin, Alejandra, Heather, and the whole team from the Digital Health Society for having us. It's been great being back, and have a great rest of your conference.